I learned my daughter had sold my house when a stranger opened my front door with his own key. He was standing on my porch in a linen shirt and khaki pants, holding a leather portfolio under one arm. Behind him, a younger woman was photographing the columns. I had just returned from the grocery store. 2 bags were cutting into my fingers. A carton of eggs was balanced against my hip, and a bunch of white hydrangeas stuck out from the top of one bag because I still believed fresh flowers made an old house look cared for. The stranger slid the key into my lock. My lock. He turned it. The front door opened. For one stunned second, neither of us moved. He looked at me. I looked at the brass key in his hand. Then he glanced past me toward the driveway, as though he expected someone else to arrive and explain why an elderly woman was standing outside the property he apparently believed belonged to him. "Can I help you?" I asked. My voice came out calmer than I felt. The younger woman lowered her phone. The man removed the key from the lock. "Mrs. Porter?" I tightened my grip on the grocery bags. "Yes." His face changed. Not guilt, not exactly. Recognition mixed with dread. He closed the door carefully. "My name is Daniel Rusk. I'm with Rusk Preservation Group." "I don't care if you're with the governor," I said. "Why do you have a key to my house?" The woman looked at Daniel. Daniel looked at the portfolio under his arm. Then he said the sentence that split my life cleanly into before and after. "Your daughter told us the property would be vacant." One of the grocery bags slipped from my hand. A jar of peach preserves struck the porch floor and shattered. Amber-colored glass spread across the old blue boards. Daniel stepped back. The younger woman gasped. I stared at the preserves leaking between the cracks, like something wounded. "My daughter told you what?" Daniel's mouth opened, but before he answered, my phone began ringing inside my purse. Claire. I knew it before I looked. Mothers recognize certain calls before they see the name. I pulled out the phone. My daughter's photograph lit the screen. She was smiling beside the Wilmington River, wind pushing dark hair across her face. I rejected the call. It rang again immediately. I rejected it again. Daniel cleared his throat. "Mrs. Porter, perhaps we should speak inside. You will not take one step into this house." His eyes moved toward the open doorway. Technically, he already had. That thought made my stomach turn. The younger woman took a careful step away from the porch. Daniel said, "I understand this is upsetting." "Do you?" "I was informed that you had approved the transfer." "What transfer?" He went silent. I stepped closer. "What transfer?" He opened the leather portfolio. Inside were documents held by brass clips. The top page carried the Chatham County seal. Below it was my name, Elaine Margaret Porter. Under that was the address I had written on thousands of forms over 37 years, 18 Bellwether Lane, Savannah, Georgia. And beneath the address were words I had to read 3 times: property conveyance and emergency restoration agreement. I put down the second grocery bag before I dropped it too. Daniel turned to the signature page. My signature was there, not forged, mine. The looping E, the narrow P, the small break between Margaret and Porter that had appeared after arthritis began stiffening my right hand. I knew exactly when I had signed it. 3 years earlier, when my husband Thomas was dying. Claire had brought a stack of hospital papers to his room: insurance forms, hospice authorizations, medication permissions, a durable power of attorney so she could handle our banking if I became too exhausted to manage it. I had signed without reading every page. I trusted her. That was what I told myself later. But the uglier truth was that I had wanted her to handle everything unpleasant, while I remained the grieving wife everyone admired. Daniel pointed to a section midway down the document. The power of attorney remained valid unless formally revoked. I never gave her permission to sell my home. The authorization gave her authority to act in matters involving real property under emergency conditions. What emergency? Daniel looked toward the house. Not at me, at the house. That was the first moment I felt something colder than anger. What emergency? I repeated. My phone rang again. Claire. This time I answered. What did you do? There was silence on the line. Not confusion, not surprise. The silence of someone who had rehearsed an explanation and suddenly understood no explanation would be enough. Mom, she said, please don't let them inside until I get there. I nearly laughed. You sold my house, and you're giving me instructions? I did not sell it the way you think. There is a man standing on my porch with a deed. It's not a final sale. He has a key. The key was for the inspection team. You told him the property would be vacant. Another silence. Claire, I thought you'd be at Aunt Ruth's until Sunday. It was Thursday. I had returned early because Ruth's air conditioning had failed and because 3 days with my sister was usually enough to remind me why we lived in different counties. You planned this while I was away. I planned it because you wouldn't listen. The words landed harder than if she had apologized. You used your father's death papers to steal my home. Mom, please. You promised me that power of attorney was for emergencies. It is an emergency. I looked at Bellwether House, 3 stories of weathered pale green siding, white columns, black shutters, tall windows with old wavy glass. A wraparound porch my husband had rebuilt twice because he never trusted anyone else to understand the angle of the original railing. People slowed down when they drove past our house. Tourists photographed it during Spring Garden Week. Neighbors referred to it simply as Bellwether, as though it were not a building but a person important enough to need only one name. There was no smoke, no broken window, no floodwater. The hydrangeas were blooming. What emergency? I asked. Claire exhaled. The west wall. I turned toward the side of the house. What about it? I'm 20 minutes away. What about the west wall? Do not let anyone open it until I arrive. Then she hung up. My daughter hung up on me after selling my house. Daniel was still watching. I felt humiliated by his expression, not because he looked judgmental, because he looked sorry for me. I had spent 62 years avoiding pity. My mother used to say pity was what people offered when respect became inconvenient. I picked up the grocery bag. Leave. Mrs. Porter. Get off my property. Daniel closed the portfolio. I'll wait in the car. You will leave the street. He nodded to the younger woman. They walked toward a dark SUV parked under the live oaks. Before getting in, Daniel turned. Mrs. Porter, we did not purchase the property for redevelopment. I don't care why you purchased something that was not for sale. He hesitated. Then he said, Your daughter made sure the demolition clause was removed. I stared at him. He got into the SUV. They did not drive away. I went inside and locked the door. Then I checked the lock twice, which was foolish because Daniel's key had already opened it. The house felt different. Nothing had changed. The entry table still held Thomas's silver bowl for loose change. The grandfather clock still ticked 3 minutes slow. The narrow crack above the archway still curved toward the ceiling like a raised eyebrow. But everything looked borrowed. I carried the groceries into the kitchen and set them on the counter. The refrigerator hummed. Water dripped somewhere. 1 drop, then another. I looked toward the sink. The faucet was dry. The dripping stopped. For several minutes, I stood in the kitchen listening to the house breathe. Bellwether had always made noises. Old houses complained. They shifted in summer, groaned in winter, sighed during storms. Thomas used to press his palm against a wall and say, "She's settling." He called the house she. He called our daughter Kiddo. He called me Laney when he wanted forgiveness. I opened my phone and searched the county property records. My hand shook so badly, I mistyped the address twice. The page loaded. There it was. A pending conveyance recorded 6 days earlier. Rusk Preservation Group. Transfer value, $1 and assumption of restoration liability. $1. My daughter had sold Bellwether House for $1. I called her back. She did not answer. I called again. No answer. By the third call, my anger had become strangely organized. I opened the drawer beside the stove and found the card for Martin Ellis, the estate attorney who had handled Thomas's will. Then I called my sister. Ruth answered on the second ring. "You forgot your blue cardigan." "Claire sold the house." Ruth laughed. "What?" "She sold Bellwether." The laughter disappeared. "What do you mean she sold it?" "I mean there is a deed. A man has a key. She used the power of attorney." Ruth whispered something away from the phone, probably telling her husband to turn down the television. Then she came back. "Where is Claire?" "On her way here." "Call the police. I'm calling Martin." "Call both. I'm not having patrol cars in front of my house." There it was. My first instinct, not safety, not truth, appearance. Even in the worst moment of my life, I could picture the neighbors watching through their plantation shutters. Ruth said, "Elaine, your daughter stole a house." "She did not steal a bicycle. The police cannot put Bellwether in an evidence locker." "You always do this." "Do what?" "Make every disaster sound socially inconvenient." I hung up on her. Martin agreed to come immediately. Then I did what any betrayed mother with too much pride and too little information might do. I walked through every room, checking what else Claire had taken. The silver was still in the dining room cabinet. Thomas's watches remained in the upstairs dresser. My jewelry box was untouched. The deed to the cemetery plots was still inside the blue fireproof safe. In Claire's childhood bedroom, the quilt I had made from her old dresses lay folded at the foot of the bed. I opened the closet. Her high school yearbooks were there, her first ballet shoes, a box of birthday cards, the cardboard model of Bellwether she built in 8th grade for a Georgia history project. She had cut every tiny shutter by hand. On the back, in purple marker, she had written, "My house one day." I sat on the edge of the bed. For 30 years, I had told Claire that Bellwether would be hers. When she was 6, I told her while we planted daffodils along the east path. When she was 13, I told her after she cried, because Thomas would not let her paint her room blue. When she left for college, I stood on the porch and told her, "No matter where you go, this will always be waiting." At her wedding, I gave a toast and said, "One day, she'll bring her own children through these doors." People had applauded. Claire had smiled. Her husband Noah had looked down at his plate. I had noticed. I had decided not to ask why. That was my gift, noticing what made me uncomfortable and calling my silence grace. The doorbell rang at 2:18. Claire stood outside. Her hair was pulled into a loose knot, and she was wearing jeans, flat sandals, and the olive green blouse she usually wore when she wanted to appear calm. I did not open the door. She knocked. "Mom." I stayed inside. "I know you're there." I almost admired the nerve of that sentence. She had apparently inherited it from me. Martin's car pulled in behind hers. He stepped out carrying his briefcase. I opened the door for him, not for her. Claire followed him inside anyway. The moment she crossed the threshold, I pointed toward the porch. "Get out." Her face tightened. "Please let me explain." "You can explain through my attorney." Martin looked between us. He was 70, silver-haired, careful, and accustomed to wealthy families pretending inheritance was about love. "Let's sit down," he said. "No. Elaine. She sold my home for $1. Claire closed her eyes. It was not a sale for $1. The county records disagree. It's a preservation transfer. They assume the restoration liability, stabilize the property, and transfer it back after the work is certified. You signed away my house. I used the authority you gave me to pay hospital bills, to protect you if you couldn't act. I can act. Not about this." The words snapped between us. Martin raised a hand. "Claire, why did you believe an emergency transfer was necessary?" She looked toward the hallway. "The west wall has to be opened." "No one is opening my walls," I said. Claire's jaw tightened. "Tell him what happened in the downstairs study." My skin prickled. Nothing happened. The wallpaper bubbled. It was humidity. The baseboard separated. Old wood expands. "You found black residue behind the bookcase." Martin looked at me. I felt heat rise into my face. It was dust. "You sprayed it with bleach before the appraiser came." Martin removed his glasses. "What appraiser?" Claire looked at me. I hated her for that look. Not accusing. Sad. "I found the listing packet," she said. Martin turned to me. "What listing packet?" I folded my arms. It was preliminary. Claire laughed once. The sound had no humor in it. "You were going to sell Bellwether." I was considering my options. "You told me this house was mine." "It is my property." "I know. You apparently don't. I know exactly whose name is on the deed. You've reminded me my entire life." That hurt because it was true. Every promise I made about giving her the house came with an invisible second sentence. "As long as you remember it is mine first." Martin asked, "Were you under contract with a buyer?" I did not answer quickly enough. Claire did. "A family from Atlanta made an offer." My head snapped toward her. "You went through my desk?" "I found the contract in the printer tray." "You had no right. They have a 5-year-old son." "What does that have to do with anything?" "He has severe asthma." The room went quiet. A faint mechanical sound came from inside the wall. The air conditioning, I told myself. Only the air conditioning. Claire stepped toward me. "You knew there was moisture." "I knew there had been moisture." "You knew Dad covered damage in the west wall." "Your father repaired it." "He covered it." "Do not talk about him like that." "He put new paneling over wet plaster." "He did what we could afford." And then he told everyone the problem was fixed. "He believed it was." "Did you?" That was the question. Not whether Thomas had known. Whether I had. I looked away. Claire's voice softened. "You found the inspection estimate in March." Martin said, "What inspection estimate?" She opened her purse and removed a folded document. I recognized the logo immediately. Coastal Environmental Assessment. I had called them after a section of wallpaper peeled away behind the study bookshelf. The inspector had walked through the house with a moisture meter. He had pressed it against the west wall. The device beeped. He pressed it higher. It beeped faster. He told me invasive testing would require cutting small openings in the wall. He said the visible staining could indicate a deeper problem. He also said historic plaster repair could cost tens of thousands of dollars. I asked whether he could issue a report without opening the wall. He said he could document only what he had observed. I told him I would think about it. Then I paid the consultation fee in cash. Claire handed the paper to Martin. At the bottom was a handwritten note. "Recommend immediate invasive inspection before occupancy or sale." Martin read it twice. Then he looked at me. "Elaine." He never confirmed anything. You were preparing to sell. I intended to disclose known defects. Claire's voice cracked. You didn't disclose the estimate. There was no confirmed defect. You hid the document in Dad's gardening ledger. It was private. You sprayed the wall, replaced the baseboard, and scheduled the buyer's inspection for a dry week. That is enough. No, Mom. It stopped being enough when you took an offer from a family with a sick child. I stepped toward her. You had no right to use your father's death to take my home. And you had no right to use his memory to make me feel guilty for not wanting it. The sentence struck with such force that no one spoke. Not wanting it. I looked at her. What did you say? Claire wiped under one eye angrily. I don't want Bellwether. You have always wanted this house. No, you have always wanted me to want it. I stared at her. Behind her, the grandfather clock ticked. 3 minutes slow, steady, indifferent. You built a model of it, I said. I was 13. You chose architecture because of this house. I chose architecture because I wanted to understand why our ceilings cracked every winter, and Dad kept telling us it was normal. You cried when we discussed selling the garden lot. I cried because it was the only place in this house that felt like mine. You told me you wanted your children here. I don't have children. That is not my fault. Her face went still. I heard what I had said only after it entered the room. Claire and Noah had tried for years. 2 failed fertility treatments. 1 adoption application they withdrew without explaining. I had never understood why they stopped. I had said things like, "These things happen in God's time." I had stored the antique crib anyway. Claire looked at me as if I had opened something uglier than a wall. Martin quietly closed his briefcase. I think the legal discussion can wait 10 minutes. No, I said. It cannot. I turned to him. Can the transfer be reversed? Yes, possibly. If the authority was improperly exercised or the emergency standard was not met. It was met, Claire said. We don't know that, Martin replied. I have the inspection results. She pulled another envelope from her purse. I did not take it. Martin did. The paper inside contained photographs, darkened wood, white fungal growth, wiring running through damp framing, a corroded junction box. The images looked nothing like my house. They looked like a ruin someone had hidden behind my walls. Martin read silently. His face changed. What? I demanded. He passed me the report. I read the summary. Elevated moisture across the west study wall. Probable long-term fungal contamination. Electrical fire risk. Structural deterioration near the rear corner. Immediate isolation recommended. Full opening required. I stopped at one phrase. Potential risk to respiratory health. I thought of the little boy from Atlanta. I had met him once. His parents brought him when they viewed the property. He wore a red baseball cap and carried a toy train. He asked whether the dumbwaiter worked. I told him it had not worked in years, but perhaps his father could repair it. His mother laughed. His father said they wanted a house where their son could grow up knowing his neighbors. I had shown them the garden. I had shown them Claire's old tree swing. I had not shown them the paper hidden inside Thomas's gardening ledger. My stomach turned. Claire said, "The restoration company agreed to stop the purchase contract before the buyers transferred their deposit." "You contacted my buyers?" "They contacted the broker after the title notice. You ruined the sale. I prevented it. You humiliated me." Her face changed. There it was, the center of everything. Not the money, not the mold, not even the house. Humiliation. People discovering I had known something was wrong. People wondering whether Elaine Porter, Garden Club president and Preservation Board volunteer, had been willing to sell danger under fresh wallpaper. I placed the report on the table. You should have come to me. I did. You accused me. I asked you to get the wall tested. You called me irresponsible. You called me hysterical. You threatened to revoke the power of attorney. You should have understood that meant stop. I understood it meant you were going to sell before I could prove anything. I looked at Martin. Get my house back. Claire inhaled slowly. Mom, get out. You can fight the transfer, but the county may condemn the west section until repairs are complete. I said, get out. I have not taken a cent. You took the decision. Yes. She looked at me with tears standing in her eyes. Yes, I did. Because every time I asked you to make one, you turned Dad into a shield. Do not use his name. You use his name every day. I slapped her. The sound was small, smaller than it should have been. Her face turned to the side. Martin stood. I had never struck my daughter before. Not when she drew on the dining room wallpaper at 4. Not when she came home drunk at 17. Not when she married Noah in a courthouse after I spent 6 months planning a church wedding. But at 62 years old, standing inside the house I had promised her, I hit her because she told the truth in a tone I could not forgive. Claire touched her cheek. She looked at me. Then she nodded once. Not in surrender, in recognition, as though something she had suspected about me had finally introduced itself. I'll send Martin every document, she said. She walked to the door. I wanted to call her back, not to apologize, to explain. That was my flaw then. I believed an explanation was the same thing as remorse. Before leaving, Claire turned to Martin. The temporary transfer requires Rusk to stabilize the property. If she reverses it before the emergency work begins, she assumes all liability. Then she looked at me. The Atlanta family's cancellation has already been processed. They won't be harmed. She opened the door. I said, you will never inherit this house. Her hand paused on the knob. For one breath, she was my little girl again, standing on the porch with scraped knees, waiting for me to soften. Then she said, that is the first honest thing you've ever said about it. She left. By sunset, half the neighborhood knew, not about the mold, about Claire. I made sure of that. I did not lie. I said my daughter had used an old power of attorney to transfer my property without permission. That was true. I said a company had arrived with keys. True. I said she had arranged everything while I was out of town. True. I simply stopped before the part where I had hidden an inspection recommendation from prospective buyers. Selective truth had always been the Porter family's cleanest room. Ruth came over that evening. She brought bourbon and outrage. I knew Claire had become self-righteous, she said, but this is criminal. We sat in the front parlor beneath Thomas's portrait. He had been 54 when it was painted, strong jaw, gray at the temples, one hand resting on the back of a chair, a man built for being remembered kindly. Ruth poured 2 drinks. What does Noah say? I have not spoken to him. Has Claire always resented you? No. The answer came too quickly. Ruth raised an eyebrow. She resented the wedding. She wanted something smaller. She resented you keeping her room. She said it felt like a museum. She resented Thomas. I set down my glass. She adored her father. Children can adore someone and still resent what they leave behind. I looked toward the portrait. Thomas gave her everything. Ruth took a drink. He gave her promises. So did I. Yes. The way she said it irritated me. What is that supposed to mean? It means promises are easy when the bill belongs to someone else. I stood. You should go. Ruth sighed. Elaine, I'm on your side. No, you are enjoying yourself. That too. At least Ruth had always been honest about her worst qualities. Before leaving, she stopped near the hallway. "Did you know about the wall?" I knew the house needed work. "That is not what I asked." "You sound like Claire. Claire sounds like you did before you married Thomas." I stared at her. Ruth opened the door. "You used to hate beautiful lies." Then she left me alone with one. For the next 2 weeks, I fought my daughter. Not directly. Through lawyers, affidavits, preservation board contacts, and people who owed me favors. I petitioned the court to suspend the transfer. I revoked Claire's power of attorney. I requested an injunction preventing Rusk Preservation Group from entering the property. I told Martin to pursue damages. He warned me the emergency report complicated everything. I told him complications were what attorneys were paid to overcome. The local preservation community split almost immediately. Some people believed Claire had saved Bellwether. Others believed adult children had become too comfortable deciding their parents were incompetent. At church, women touched my arm and said, "We are praying for reconciliation." What they meant was, we heard everything. At the grocery store, Mrs. Talbot asked whether Claire had financial problems. I said no. She looked disappointed. Scandal without greed was harder to digest. Then the photographs appeared online, not publicly, in a private neighborhood group, which was worse. Someone posted a picture of the West Wall inspection. Someone else shared a screenshot of the pending transfer. A third person wrote, "Wasn't this house recently listed?" By noon, the Atlanta buyer's broker had called my broker. By 2, my broker resigned from the listing. By 4, the Preservation Board requested that I step aside temporarily from my committee position. I called Claire. She answered after 6 rings. "Did you release the photographs?" "No. Someone did. Rusk submitted them with the county's safety filing. Public records are not secret because you dislike them. You have destroyed my name." "I'm sorry," she sounded tired. "That made me angrier than defensiveness would have." "Are you?" "Yes." "Then reverse the transfer." "No." "You said it was temporary." "It is. Sign it back now." "Not until the wall is stabilized." "It is my risk. It becomes the worker's risk, the neighbor's risk if there is an electrical fire, the next buyer's risk when you decide the market has forgotten." "You think I am a monster." "No." Her voice softened. "I think you are scared, and when you are scared, you make other people pay for the privilege of pretending you are not." I gripped the phone. "You learned that cruelty from your father." "No, Mom." She paused. "I learned silence from him. The cruelty came from finally stopping." She hung up. 3 days later, the court denied my request for an immediate reversal. The judge did not validate Claire's entire action. He simply ruled that emergency stabilization could proceed while ownership was disputed. Rusk Preservation Group returned on a Monday morning. This time, I let them inside. Not because I agreed, because the county posted a notice stating the west section could not remain occupied until inspected. The workers sealed the study with plastic. They carried equipment through my front hall. They photographed every surface. They placed protective runners over the hardwood floor Thomas had refinished by hand. I followed them like a prison guard. Daniel Rusk removed the books from the west shelves one by one. Behind the lowest shelf, the baseboard came away with almost no resistance. The smell reached us first. Wet soil, rotting paper, something sweet and sour. One worker looked at Daniel. Daniel put on a respirator. They cut a narrow rectangle into the plaster. The wall opened. Behind it, the wood was black, not stained, consumed. A section crumbled beneath the worker's gloved hand. The wiring insulation had split. The junction box was furred with corrosion. Daniel turned off power to half the house. I stood behind the plastic barrier, watching the skeleton of Bellwether appear. Thomas's work was visible inside, newer boards nailed over older ones, plastic sheeting folded into gaps, a date written in pencil. April 2008, the year of the tropical storm, the year we told everyone the west wall had been fully restored. Daniel pointed to the framing. This was not repaired properly. My husband did the best he could. I'm not judging him. Everyone is judging him. Daniel looked at me. No, Mrs. Porter. Most people are judging what happened after you knew. I wanted to throw him out. Instead, I said, "How much?" He glanced toward the open wall. For the immediate stabilization? For everything. He gave me a number. I laughed because I thought I had misheard. He repeated it. The restoration would cost more than half the profit I had expected from selling the house. If the corner framing had to be replaced, it could cost even more. I don't have that kind of cash. The agreement allows Rusk Preservation to finance emergency repairs against the property. So Claire put a lien on my home. She prevented the county from requiring immediate evacuation. I could have arranged financing. Daniel said nothing. He did not need to. My application for a home equity line had already been rejected because my retirement income was limited, and the house carried more deferred maintenance than I admitted. That was why I wanted the Atlanta sale. Not because I was greedy. At least that was what I told myself. I was tired. Bellwether consumed money the way old families consumed apologies. Roof repairs, insurance increases, foundation work, paint every 6 years, custom windows, historic district approvals. After Thomas died, I discovered he had borrowed against his life insurance years earlier. The retirement account was smaller than he told me. The house was valuable on paper and hungry in reality. I had promised it to Claire because promises cost nothing while I was alive. Then I planned to sell it because survival cost more. I had not told her because I knew what she would say. Not about losing the house, about the buyers, about the wall, about me. That afternoon, while the workers removed damaged plaster, they found a metal box inside the wall. It was small and rusted around the edges. Daniel brought it to me. "Do you recognize this?" I did. Thomas kept old receipts in it. He called it his evidence box because he never trusted contractors. The latch had rusted shut. Daniel pried it open. Inside were invoices, photographs, and folded sheets of graph paper. Thomas's handwriting covered the top page. Measurements, material costs, notes about the storm damage. Then one sentence: full replacement recommended, cannot afford, reinforce temporarily, and revisit within 5 years. 5 years. He wrote that 18 years earlier. Beneath the note was an estimate from a licensed contractor. Thomas had known. I sat down in the dining room because my legs stopped feeling reliable. Claire had accused him of covering the damage. I slapped her. I told myself she was desecrating the dead. But the dead had left his handwriting inside the wall. Daniel placed another photograph in front of me. It showed Thomas and me standing in the study during the renovation. I remembered the day. I wore a yellow blouse. Thomas held a hammer. The open wall was visible behind us. On the back, in my own handwriting, I had written, "Temporary mess, permanent home." I stared at the words, temporary. I had known too. Maybe not the mold, maybe not the electrical risk, but I knew the repair had been temporary. Over the years, temporary became family history. Family history became truth, and truth became whatever allowed us to sleep. That evening, I drove to Claire's house. She lived 20 minutes away in a neighborhood of modest brick homes with small front yards and children's bicycles left carelessly on driveways. I had criticized the house when she bought it. Too plain, too close to the road, no architectural distinction. Claire said she liked that nothing in it required permission from a preservation committee. I thought she was joking. Noah answered the door. He looked older than the last time I had seen him. "Is Claire here?" "Yes. May I come in?" He did not move. That hurt. I had never been denied entry to my daughter's home. Then I remembered Daniel's key turning in my lock. The universe could be vulgar when making a point. Noah stepped aside. Claire was in the kitchen, wrapping a ceramic bowl in newspaper. Boxes lined the walls. "You're moving?" "Yes." "Where?" "North Carolina." The room tilted slightly. "When?" "Next month." "You never told me." I tried. "When?" "At Christmas." "You said we couldn't discuss major decisions while Ruth was serving dessert." That was not a serious conversation. It was serious to me. I looked at the boxes. "You cannot leave while this legal situation is unresolved." She stared at me. "I am not under court supervision." "You created this." "I stopped the sale. Rusk will stabilize the house. Your attorney will resolve the title. And then what?" "Then it will be yours again." "You said you didn't want it." "I don't." I looked at Noah. "Would you give us a moment?" Claire said. "He can stay." "Claire." "He is my husband." The emphasis was gentle but clear. Unlike me, she was not going to protect a family hierarchy by making her spouse disappear. I placed Thomas's note on the kitchen counter. She read it. Her expression barely changed. "You found the box. You knew about it?" "I knew Dad had documented the repair. I didn't know where the papers were." "He intended to fix it." "Yes. He ran out of time." "He lived 18 more years." I flinched. Claire closed her eyes. "I'm sorry." "No, you are not. I'm sorry that hurt. I'm not sorry it's true." I looked around the kitchen. There were no antiques, no framed family portraits, no evidence that she had ever been promised a mansion. "Why North Carolina?" "Noah was offered a position in Raleigh." "What about your firm?" "I resigned." "Because of this scandal?" "Because I'm tired." I almost laughed. "You're 40. You don't know what tired is." She looked at Noah, then back at me. "We withdrew from adoption because you told the social worker Bellwether would eventually be our home." My mouth went dry. "What?" "The agency interviewed family members. You talked about the stairs, the railings, the garden pond, the restoration work. I was showing stability. You described a future we had not agreed to. I said the house would be yours, and the agency started asking how we planned to make a historic 3-story property safe for a toddler. That is manageable. You said you would remain in the house. I would have had my own rooms. You said family should stay together. I was offering support. You were assigning us a life." Noah placed one hand on Claire's shoulder. She continued. "When we explained that we planned to stay here, the social worker asked why your expectations were so different from ours. It became another concern in an already difficult process." I stared at her. "You withdrew because of me?" "No. We withdrew because we realized we were making every decision around managing you." I shook my head. "That is unfair." "Yes." Her eyes filled. "It is unfair. It is unfair that I blamed you entirely. It is unfair that I used the power of attorney instead of taking you to court before the transfer. It is unfair that I made a decision about your property because I believed my judgment mattered more than your consent." I had not expected her to admit that. My anger lost its shape. Claire touched Thomas's note. I was wrong to do it in secret. Then she looked at me. But I was not wrong to stop the sale. We stood on opposite sides of the counter, 2 women who had each confused control with care. I said, "You could have destroyed everything your father and I built." "No, Mom." Her voice broke. "The wall was already destroying it. I just stopped painting over the stain." I left without asking her to stay. Pride is strange. It can survive evidence, loneliness, and even shame. Sometimes it dies only when asking for love requires speaking plainly. I was not ready. The restoration lasted 4 months. The west study was stripped to framing. Part of the rear corner had to be rebuilt. The wiring was replaced. The mold remediation extended into the floor system. 3 original windows were removed and restored off-site. Every week brought a new bill. To pay the legal costs and settle the restoration lien, I sold the garden lot on the east side of the property. It was the only portion of Bellwether that could be separated without violating the historic parcel restrictions. The buyer planned to build a narrow modern house. The Preservation Board objected. I did not. The day the survey stakes appeared, I stood beneath Claire's old magnolia tree. Her swing had been removed years earlier, but a pale groove remained around the branch, where the rope once rubbed against the bark. That garden had been hers, not legally, emotionally, which was the only ownership I had never respected. Martin eventually negotiated the title transfer back to me. Claire signed every document without argument. She waived any future claim against the property. At the bottom of the final page was a separate notarized statement. I, Claire Porter Hale, disclaim any present or future inheritance interest in Bellwether House. I read the sentence twice. Then a third time. Martin watched me. You don't have to accept the disclaimer. She signed it. She can withdraw it if both parties agree. She does not want the house. No. The word sounded indecent inside his office. For decades, I believed Bellwether was the greatest thing I could give my daughter. I never considered that making her carry it might be a way of asking her to carry me. Claire and Noah moved to Raleigh in October. I learned through Ruth, not because Claire told her, because Noah posted a photograph online. They stood in front of a rented townhouse with 2 mugs of coffee. The caption said, "New city, smaller house, lighter life." I stared at the word lighter. Then I closed the app. At Thanksgiving, I set the dining room table for 6 out of habit. My hand paused over Claire's place. I removed 1 plate. Then I put it back. Ruth arrived with her husband. Martin came because his wife had died the previous spring, and I knew what empty holidays did to a person. Daniel Rusk stopped by with the final restoration certificate. He declined dinner until Ruth practically dragged him to the table. The west study smelled of new plaster and linseed oil. The repaired wall was smooth, perfect, too perfect. You could not see where the damage had been. That bothered me. After dinner, I took a pencil and wrote a small date inside the lowest cabinet beside the restored wall. The date the damage was opened, not repaired, opened. Some things deserve to be remembered at the moment they became visible. In December, I mailed Claire a package. Inside was the cardboard model of Bellwether she had built in 8th grade. I almost included the quilt. I almost included Thomas's note. I almost included a letter explaining the financial pressure, the loneliness, the terror of watching my future disappear into repair bills. Instead, I wrote 4 sentences. I knew enough to stop the sale, and I chose not to. You were wrong to use my signature. You were right about the danger. I am sorry I made loving me feel like inheriting a debt. I mailed it before I could improve the language into something less honest. Claire did not call. 3 weeks later, a small envelope arrived. Inside was the purple marker sign from the back of her model. She had cut it away carefully. My house one day. Under it, she had written, "It was never the house I wanted. It was the promise that I could come home without owing you for it. There was no forgiveness, no invitation, no dramatic reconciliation, just the truth. In February, the new owners of the garden lot removed Claire's magnolia tree. The roots crossed the planned foundation. I stood behind my curtains while workers cut the branches. Each one struck the ground with a soft, leafy crash. I could have fought them. The tree was technically mine until closing. The neighborhood association might have delayed the permit. The preservation board owed me sympathy. But for once, I understood that keeping something because I could was not the same as loving it. I watched them take the tree down. That spring, Bellwether House reopened for the historic garden tour. Visitors admired the restored study. They ran their fingers over the repaired molding. They complimented the way the new plaster matched the old. One woman asked whether maintaining such a house felt like preserving family history. I looked toward the west wall, then toward the empty window where Claire's magnolia once stood. "No," I said. "It feels like deciding which parts of history you are finally willing to stop hiding." She smiled as if I had said something elegant. Maybe I had. People often mistake pain for wisdom once it is phrased correctly. I still live at Bellwether. The house is safe now. The electrical system is sound. The walls are dry. The title is in my name. There is no lien, no pending sale, no daughter waiting to inherit it. Claire sends a card at Christmas. I send one on her birthday. We speak occasionally, carefully, like women crossing a floor that has been repaired, but still remember where it once gave way. She has never apologized again for stopping the sale. I have never asked her to. Last month, she sent me a photograph. She and Noah were standing in front of a small white bungalow outside Raleigh. There was a sold sign in the yard. Beside them stood a little girl of about 4, holding Claire's hand. No explanation, no announcement, just a photograph. I sat at my kitchen table for a long time. Then I turned the picture over. On the back, Claire had written, "Her name is Mia. We're taking things slowly. Please don't make promises for her yet." I cried then. Not because she had adopted a child without telling me. Not because I had missed the first meetings, the paperwork, or the day Mia entered their home. I cried because my daughter had left a door open exactly wide enough for me to approach without claiming the room behind it. I called her. When she answered, neither of us spoke for several seconds. Finally, I said, "She has your eyes." Claire laughed softly. "No, she doesn't." "I know." Another silence. "I would like to meet her," I said. "I know. When you're ready." This time the silence felt different, not empty, unfurnished, a space where something new might be built if neither of us rushed to decide what it had to become. Claire brought Mia to Savannah in June. They stayed at a hotel. That hurt. I did not protest. They visited Bellwether for lunch. Mia ran her fingers along the porch railing and asked whether the house was a castle. I told her no. Claire watched me carefully. Mia asked whether she could see upstairs. I said, "Only if your mother says it's all right." Claire looked surprised. Then she nodded. We walked through the rooms. I did not tell Mia which one could someday be hers. I did not show her the antique crib. I did not describe the garden that used to exist. In the restored study, she stopped beside the cabinet where I had written the date. "What's in there?" she asked. "Nothing you need to carry," I said. Claire looked at me. Her eyes filled, but she smiled. When they left, Mia hugged me quickly and ran toward the car. Claire remained on the porch. For 1 second, I thought she might hug me too. She did not. Instead, she touched the white column beside the steps. "Looks good," she said. "The restoration?" "The truth." Then she walked away. I stood beneath the roof Thomas rebuilt, inside the property Claire saved by taking it from me, and watched my daughter leave without begging her to come back. Bellwether House remained mine. Every deed, wall, window, and repaired board belonged to me. But ownership had finally become smaller than love. The house stayed in my name, and for the first time I stopped calling that a victory.